So today, for day 2, we're going to do some more practice simplifying radicals. So in your own words, what are some of the steps that you do to simplify a radical? Some of us will find factor pairs, kind of like doing the factor tree, and then hopefully find and discover that one of the numbers that we discover and find is a perfect square. So remember, it really helps if you list your perfect squares out. 1 times 1, 1 squared. 2 times 2, 2 squares, 4. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9. 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16, and so forth. But keep in mind, I probably not give you anything that it's going to require more than 144. These numbers get really large, these perfect squares. So what happens when you're simplifying radicals, sometimes you'll see that you have another number out in front. Oh my. So don't let that worry you. So like for example, number 1, 4 times the square root of 90. Pretend the 4 is not there. Just cover it right up. Focus on the square root of 90. Now, 90 ends in a 0. So remember, the factor pairs of 90 are 9 and 10. 9 is one of those perfect squares. So write down the 4. Break down the square root of 9 times square root of 10. Now keep in mind the square root of 9 is 3. So that 4 times 3, those are rational numbers. Those are outside. They're like multiplying integers. 4 times 3 is 12. Square root of 10 stays behind. The square root sign stays. Because remember, the square root of 10 is an irrational number. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, a really neat way to check your work. Now, I know you guys don't have a calculator like this at home, but I do. So let me show you my work. If I were to type 4 times the square root of 90, I end up getting this big long decimal, right? Well, double check to make sure I have the right answer. I'm going to type 12 times the square root of 10. Guess what? It's a match. So, not that you're taking the Regents exam this year, but in future, when you're taking a special test like that, let's call it ACT or SAT or maybe a college prep test down the road, you might have a multiple choice. That's another strategy you can use to double check that you have the right answer just to feel confident. So that's example number 1. Example number 2 is kind of neat because don't worry about the fraction. 36 is a perfect square. Again, cover up the 2/3. The square root of 36 is 6, and you'll notice the square root sign drops. Take 2/3 times 6. Remember, when you multiply fractions, multiply across your numerator, multiply across your denominator, then simplify. Here's another example, number 3. Now, number 3 contains another perfect square. Ignore the 4/5 for a moment. Take the square root of 25. That's 5. 4/5. Now, I don't know if you remember this for multiplying fractions, but if you have a common factor in the numerator up on top with a factor on the bottom denominator, they can cancel out. We call that cross factoring. And then you're left with 4/1 or simply 4. Now, example number 4, I wish I had more perfect squares in the problem, but I don't. Leave the 1/2 out. Think of the factor pairs of 24. I mean, worst case scenario, why don't you go back and look at your list of perfect squares? Hey, that 4 should just jump out, grab your attention. 4 times 6 is 24. So take the square root of 24 is 2. Now, this is really interesting. Some of you might remember when I talked about this in class. 1/2 and 2 are called reciprocals. And when you multiply reciprocals together, you actually end up getting 1. So that's where I got the 1, square root of 6. Now, I boxed both of these because they both are valid answers for me, but on a standardized test, like I said, down the road, in your future, you might be taking SAT, ACT, maybe a college exam, prep exam to get into college, military test. The standardized answer typically is just radical 6. It's understood that the invisible one in front is the coefficient. Let's look at some more in the back. I think there's a lot more examples to take a look at. Alrighty, here's another good example, number 5. Number 5, 2/5 times the square root of 75. Well, again, I think of 75 cents when I see 75. 3/4 makes a 75 cents, so 25 and 3 are the factors. Now, the square root of 25 is 5, but remember, once again, the 5's cancel, and all you have left outside is 2, square root of 3. I don't know if there's any Monopoly fans out there, but one of our teachers in our math department, she thinks of like the radical sign, the irrational stays behind the bars, jail bars. See, those are the irrational numbers. The 2 got out. So maybe that might help you keep in mind that you're always going to have a number behind inside the square root sign. Let's look at one more example here. 1/8 times the square root of 128. 128 is a pretty large number, so it would benefit from you if you remember your factor pairs. That's an even number. Divide this number by 2 in a calculator and guess what you get? 64, which is a perfect square. And once again, we get here 1/8 times 8. These are reciprocals, and when you multiply reciprocals, you do get 1, radical 2, or simply radical 2. Hopefully these examples are making some more sense for you. Again, the only difference with these examples, you happen to have a number on front. Might be an integer, might be a fraction. Focus on simplifying the radical first. Oh, I probably should do one more here. What if it's a negative sign? No sweat. A negative times a positive still is negative. Leave the negative 1/3 out and break down 27 using 9 and 3. The square root of 9 is 3. Oops. A little too eager there. I forgot to write my negative 1/3. Negative 1/3 times 3, square root of 3. Now, I know 1/3 and 3 reciprocals, but a negative times a positive negative. So you can have a negative outside the radical sign. So for practice, I'm going to ask you to take a look at these examples. I'll send a picture of this. They're just 4 practice problems, more simplifying a radical. Don't let the fractions worry you. Simplify the square root of 72, the square root of 48, square root of 96, square root of 63 first before you proceed with the fraction. Good luck, and as always, send me a message if you have any questions.